What does it feel like to be shot? Is it a physical feeling?
Yeah, it doesn't hurt as much as people imagine it hurts because of your adrenaline and how the shock of what's actually going on, it hurts after.
50 Cent is a legendary rapper. Most people know him for his unique style and delivery, which has made him one of the most successful rappers of all time. But did you know that at one time, he brought down a major narco kingpin operating in his area?
Ghetto Qu'aran was a beautiful song, but that same song is getting motherfuckers locked up.
That landed him in the hospital with 9 bullet wounds.
This gun's still going on. You jumping around in the backseat of the car and shit. You don't know whether you're gonna get up out this bitch or not, man, you know?
So what exactly did he do to get the crime group so mad at him? What happened after he was and what is his involvement in the war against the cartel? We'll explore these and many questions in the video. Curtis Jackson, also known as 50 Cent, had a tough start in life. He was born on July 6, 1975, to his 15-year-old single mom, Sabrina Jackson. They lived in a tough neighborhood in Queens, New York, where crime was a big problem. His mom made a living by selling narcotics and was quite tough herself. She would scold 50 Cent whenever he showed any emotions or appeared weak. In an interview, 50 Cent admitted that he was more afraid of his mom than the bullies at school. "I got bumped around a lot in the park, but I was more afraid of my mom than the people I got bumped around by, because I could not escape her. She would look at me on the floor when he was upset and say, 'Get up, what you over there crying for?' acting like a little girl." When 50 Cent was 8 years old, his life took a tragic turn when his mom, Sabrina, died. She was only 23 years old, and reports were suggesting that she had been murdered. An article by The Guardian reported that Sabrina had met someone in a bar who spiked her drink, took her home, and left her unconscious with the windows closed and the gas on. 50 told the publication that when she was found, several days later, her body was all messed up. After his mom passed away, 50 Cent was like a lost kid, but he had someone he could always rely on, his grandma, Beulah Jackson. In a VH1 documentary, 50 Cent shared that his grandma legally adopted him when he was a boy. He would later show his gratitude by buying her house in 2005. Although his grandma did her best to provide for him, life was not the same as when his mother was still alive. As a narcotics dealer, Sabrina had a little more money than her parents and could therefore afford to buy her son things that her parents couldn't. For this reason, 50 Cent found himself following in his mother's footsteps at the age of 12. He would lie to his grandparents that he was in an after-school program when he was actually selling drugs. "I did things in the streets, then I was able to adjust and leave that at my doorstep. Once I get in the house, I'm my grandmother's baby. But once I'm outside, I do whatever I got to do to get by." It wasn't long before 50 had his first run-in with law enforcement. He was in 10th grade at Andrew Jackson High School when a metal detector caught him trying to sneak guns and drug money to the school. Things got worse when, on June 29, 1994, he was arrested for selling coke to an undercover police officer. 3 weeks later, the police searched his home and found different drugs and a gun. He got sentenced to 3 to 9 years in prison, but he ended up serving only 6 months in a boot camp and got his GED. But despite being a narco dealer, 50 Cent has mentioned in various interviews that he didn't use the substances himself.
I remember asking you, how many drugs have you taken?
Right, and I don't actually use drugs. It was a
Never taken drugs?
No, it was an easy option. It was either you can take $10 or $5 that you spent on buying weed to smoke it or put it in your pocket. My motivation at that point, it wasn't like I was making the decision to do it with the comfort of having things just around me at access. There weren't things around.
Jackson started rapping in his friend's basement, using turntables to record over music. In 1996, he met Jam Master Jay of Run DMC, who taught him how to count bars, write choruses, structure songs, and make records. By 2000, he had his first album and was making a name for himself in the hip-hop industry, with popular songs such as How to Rob and Thug Love. He was no longer on the streets, and life was starting to look up for him. He'd started calling himself 50 Cent as a way of expressing change. The name was inspired by a robber from Brooklyn in the 1980s, known as 50 Cent. Jackson chose the name because it represented everything he wanted to say. He saw himself as similar to the original 50 Cent, someone who provided for themselves by any means necessary. But his life would take a terrifying turn. On May 24th, 2000, 24-year-old 50 Cent was in a car with friends outside his grandma's house in Queens, when out of nowhere, another car pulled up, and someone came out and fired multiple times at him.
This gun's still going on. You You jumping around in the backseat of the cars. You don't know whether you're gonna get up out this or not, man, you know?
He got hit 9 times in the hand, arm, hip, both legs, chest, and left cheek. He would later describe the horrific experience in an interview with Oprah.
What does it feel like to be shot? Is it a physical feeling?
Yeah, it doesn't hurt as much as people imagine it hurts because of your adrenaline and how the shock of what's actually going on, it hurts after.
Heartbreakingly, his grandma witnessed the brutal attack, and his son was inside the house when this happened. One of his friends was also wounded in the process, and they were both rushed to the hospital, where 50 Cent had to stay for 13 days for treatment. 50's near-death experience has become like an urban legend in the hip-hop world, but the reality was pretty serious. After the shooting, he had to relearn how to walk, and it took about 6 weeks for him to move normally again. The attack also left him with permanent scars and changes in his appearance that affected how he talks and raps.
Oh man, I got shot in my hand. My thumb came out my hand. My face, knocked the tooth.
Wow, oh my goodness, there's a hole there.
Yeah, it kind of changed my voice too, and this is the voice that sells 8 million records, so I think everything happens for a reason.
Initially, 50 Cent thought the person who fired at him was a drug dealer, but it turned out he was shot by a group of 3 people as a response to a diss track he made about a powerful drug lord named Kenneth McGriff. McGriff was born on September 19, 1960, the middle child of 3 in family-friendly South Jamaica, Queens. McGriff's parents were both city transit workers, and the family lived a middle-class lifestyle. McGriff was introduced to a sect of the Nation of Islam called the 5% Nation while attending Catherine and Count Basie Junior High School. The 5 Percenters were formed in the 1960s based on the belief that 5% of the African-American population were destined to be its natural leaders. McGriff's involvement with the group earned him the nickname The Supreme. McGriff was introduced to local drug kingpin Fat Cat Nichols through a fellow 5%er, Prince Rashim, who was a cousin of Nichols. Supreme formed his own crew shortly after called the Supreme Team. He based his drug business in the Baisley Park housing projects, which were close to McGriff's home. Under McGriff's leadership, the group grew big, reaching hundreds of members, and they pretty much controlled the crack coke trade in their area. However, things took a turn in 1987 when McGriff got arrested after a joint investigation by state and federal authorities. He was locked up at Elmira State Prison in New York. While McGriff served his time, the Supreme Team was led by his nephew, Gerald Prince Miller, who was known to be vicious and unforgiving. Through his leadership, dozens of people were tortured, beaten, and murdered, and as the head of the organization, McGriff was blamed for the violence. As soon as he was released in 1989, he landed right back in prison for engaging in a continuing criminal enterprise. This is where someone commits a series of criminal activities as part of a group. After a plea bargain, he was sentenced to 12 years in prison for the offense. After about 5 years, he was released on parole in early 1994, but by the end of the year, he was sent back to prison for breaking parole rules. He served another 2.5 years before being released again in 1997. After his stint in prison, McGriff tried to rebrand his image from a crack kingpin into a movie producer. He made friends with hip-hop producer Irv Gotti and began meeting rappers and urban musicians, often providing them with protection. In exchange, Gotti and his friends began creating the financial backing needed to make McGriff's Hollywood vision a reality. However, because of his reputation, things didn't really work out as planned, especially because the FBI was still investigating him. Things got worse for him when 50 Cent dropped his track Ghetto Qu'aran, naming him and his partners as major narco dealers in Los Angeles.
Like that.
In the song, 50 Cent refers to McGriff as Premi, which is short for Supreme, and calls him a respected businessman, and his partner Prince as a killer. McGriff was infuriated by this and viewed 50 Cent as a snitch.
They wouldn't say nothing to me though. He had a problem later when law enforcement started to hold on to the record.
Apparently, the FBI had even approached 50 Cent about the song, and he reportedly replied by saying, "Listen to the record." This statement led McGriff to believe that 50 Cent was working with the FBI and was telling them to use his record as evidence against them. So, what did he do? He put out a hit on 50 Cent. Investigators believed that McGriff had hired killers to get rid of 4 people, 50 Cent being one of them. 50 was the first one to get hit, and fortunately for him, he survived the attack. 2 of the other victims did not not make it, and the fourth one managed to escape and was never found. 3 weeks after the attempt on 50, one of the hitmen named Daryl Baum was gunned down in a drive-by incident in Brooklyn. Some people thought that it was retaliation by 50 Cent, but it later turned out that he was involved in some narcotics deal gone wrong. Daryl happened to be a friend of Mike Tyson's, and the boxer later dedicated a fight to him.
I dedicate this fight to my brother, Daryl Baum, who died. I'll be there to see you. I love you with all my heart.
After the failed hit on 50 Cent, McGriff and his gang were still not done with him and tried to sabotage his career by ensuring that no record label would work with him. 50 was already dealing with post-traumatic stress because of the incident, and now with his career being messed with, he got so frustrated that he tried to get rid of McGriff. He wanted to blue premies McGriff head off 12 o'clock in the afternoon in front of his grandmother's house, the same way they did it to him. Although he didn't go through with his plan, things did end up working in his favor when McGriff was arrested and sentenced to life in prison for murder and other charges. Over the years, several more Supreme members and partners mentioned in 50's Ghetto Qu'aran would be arrested and locked up for various charges. However, 50 still denies that his song had anything to do with this.
Ghetto Qu'aran was a beautiful song, but that same song is getting motherfuckers locked up.
Meanwhile, since 50 could no longer work in a US studio, he ended up going to Canada to produce his music. In 2002, he released the mixtape Guess Who's Back, which put him back in the game and helped him regain his popularity. One of the songs in the tape was a diss track called You, aimed at the people who tried to kill him. The tape got the attention of Eminem, who then introduced him to Dr. Dre, and he got a $1 million record deal, which saw him becoming the legendary rapper that he is today.
I actually came in contact with the twins in 2004.
Wow. On everything, we winning up here for your ass lost.
Because they took it, the dudes that robbed them took it to Jay from Flores. He immediately, when he realized that the main diamonds, they took it to him because he would be the guy that could pay for it.
If you haven't heard of Peter and Jay Flores, they are the twin brothers from Chicago who helped bring down the infamous narco kingpin El Chapo. The brothers were the biggest narco dealers in Chicago's history, working closely with major drug cartels like the Sinaloa and Beltran Leyva cartels. They had become invaluable not only to the cartels, but to El Chapo himself. Sometime in 2004, 50 Cent lost a very expensive chain that was stolen in Chicago from a friend of his. The thief reportedly then sold the chain to one of the twin brothers because they were the only ones who could afford it. The brothers then returned the chain to 50 through his record company. 50 appreciated the gesture and saw this to mean that the brothers valued the relationship with him more than the jewelry, so they formed a friendship. Years later, the brothers were arrested for narco trafficking and sentenced to 14 years in prison. They also agreed to help the authorities form a case against El Chapo and went undercover to get the evidence. The evidence and the information they brought helped to not only bring down El Chapo, but several of his top leaders and dozens of other narcotics wholesalers from Chicago to Mexico. When 50 heard what the twins were doing, he knew that there was more to the story. He contacted a journalist friend from the UK whom he trusted to tell the story. They began the podcast, Surviving El Chapo, the twins who brought down a drug lord. The brothers were in a safe house at the time, but they were more than willing to share their story with 50 Cent.
The law is not there to protect criminals. It's there to protect the innocent. I was a criminal, so the law wasn't there to benefit me.
I'm Curtis 50 Cent Jackson.
And I'm Charlie Webster.
Let me tell you a story about two brothers. If you think this is just another narco story, you're wrong.
The first season of the series focuses on how the brothers built their narco smuggling empire and wound up as government informants. In the second season, which was released in 2023, the twins talk about their stay in prison and confronting El Chapo in court. Over the years, 50 has spoken about his experience with gang culture in various interviews and through his music.
Because we communicate through photographs, through social media, you're constantly reminded of what
the things that you don't have, you mean? Right. Like the jewelry, the cars?
It would make you feel like you don't have much to live for because you don't have much.
So you think that's the impetus behind a lot of this?
I think it's a part of why they get involved with gang culture and why they participate in those behaviors.
While he acknowledges the realities of gang culture and street life, 50 Cent also emphasizes the negative consequences and struggles associated with it. He has been open about the impact of violence and crime on communities, and he doesn't glamorize the hardships he faced. Instead, he often uses his own life story to highlight the importance of making better choices and rising above difficult circumstances.
A lot of the stuff that we see, like the criminal activity in gang culture, it be young guys that they haven't developed their consequential thinking yet.
Yeah.
I don't think they really know what they're doing. Like, there's a lot of wet pillows in prison.
Yeah.
Like, under the circumstances of being incarcerated while they're alone.
Yeah.
They're crying, but they're not doing it in front of anybody.
It's concerning. Like, gang culture wasn't as big when I came. Because we come from hustlers. I come from people. The financial part of living better is connected to all of the street, all their motivation. Like, when you get the gang stuff, it's more, they honor violence. They honor the guy who does more damage.
In a bid to help former gang members get off the streets and transform their lives, 50 launched a TV series called Redemption Inc. in 2023. The show, which is set to be streamed on Hulu, will follow former gang and hate group members as they get old body art changed into new, non-affiliated designs. What do you think about what 50 Cent is doing? Let me know in the comment, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell button.